Finally, good to be back, guys. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing?
How are you?
All good. So good to be back on air after a small break, which was much needed. Yep. And yeah, it feels so good to be amongst all of you once again, talking cricket. That's what we love doing. All right, Yogesh seems to
Yogesh
be
is
in
feeling very cold, I think.
exactly in a winter mood in England.
So the cricket season is long gone, right? Now is the cricket talking season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are done with being on the field. Now we are doing talking about the field. What happens on the
So
pitch.
anybody who's seen my performances in the last season gone by, they'd say, "Why is this guy talking about cricket anymore?"
That's
That's the easier thing to do.
You didn't need to score a lot of runs to talk
talking is a
about
lot
cricket,
easier
right?
than playing.
Exactly. That's why we are living in the right generation of armchair critics. We can talk
Yes,
anything, write anything on
absolutely.
social media. All right, guys, good to be back. Thanks, Devendra, once again for joining in. And what a
My
wonderful
pleasure.
topic to be back with. And September 1986, one of the most historic Test matches in the history of Test cricket. The second Test match which was tied after the only one which was done in 1960 between West Indies and Australia, and this was India and Australia on home soil in India. The Madras Test, which is known as the earlier Chennai used to be known as Madras, and some amazing performances both with the bat and ball, and some really controversial moments as well. Some incredible skills on display, especially by Dean Jones at that double hundred. We'll talk about, and so I will leave the floor to you, Devendra, to start off the discussion.
So I think 1986 when Alan Border's Australian team came to India, it was one of those rare occasions where India actually went into a series against Australia as the favorites. It hadn't happened too many times. In fact, the only previous instance I can recall is 79-80, where Kim Hughes got the Australian team to India, and all the leading Australian cricketers of the time were part of
Yeah.
WSC, Kerry Packers World Series cricket. But
Yes.
this was a full strength Australian team, and Australian cricket was in a process of transition because the big three, Greg Chappell, Dennis Lillee, Rodney Marsh, had retired in '83. And then the next year, nearly 15 cricketers went on a rebel tour of South Africa, which in those days was forbidden territory. And they were all slapped with a 3-year ban from official international cricket. So Australia was pretty much, a team in transition. You had Alan Border as the captain, who had played about 70 test matches. But the second most experienced member of the team, I think it was Ray Bright and David Boone. They were the two most experienced members. They had played about maybe 10 test matches or so. So that was the gap between the most experienced player and the second most experienced player. And on the other hand, India were raring to go. We had nearly won a test series in Australia the previous year, come very close to, but couldn't really apply the knockout punch. And then we went to England, where we beat England in England very comprehensively.
Yeah.
The last time we had, before
We won the
2021,
series.
the last time we won 2 test matches in a series in England. So we had won that series comprehensively. So, we held all the aces when that series, the India Australia series of 86-87, got underway in Chennai. And Alan Border did what was expected. He won the toss, elected to bat, and then Australia just batted and batted and batted. Dean Jones, as you said, played an innings for the ages. David Boone and Alan Border also scored centuries. So it was a great start, a start that took the Indians and took many of us, the watchers, by surprise. But a great start to the Test match.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the one thing which always doesn't get mentioned is the conditions. It was extremely hot in Chennai, in Madras back then. So I mean, it was energy sapping, especially for the Australians. Even though some of them, I remember a moment wherein I think probably Alan Border mentioned this on air somewhere, that Dean Jones, when he was kind of getting dehydrated, so he used a sledge to kind of motivate him. in the middle, wherein Dean Jones was saying that I can't take it anymore, and Border said that okay, let me see if I can get a Queenslander in then. So
Yes.
that kind of
Yeah.
motivated him to go on, and that was incredible. The way
Because Greg Ritchie, who was Alan Border's teammate at Queensland, was to come in next.
exactly
Dean Jones was from Victoria.
from Victoria, exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think Dean Jones has been on air saying he doesn't remember a thing after he'd scored 120 odd runs. So
Yes.
actually
Absolutely.
playing in that state of mind and then getting a double hundred is quite something.
He spent
Exactly.
And he
the
was
remaining few
towards the
days
end,
in
he
the
was literally
hospital.
vomiting. He was taken to hospital after he got out,
Yes.
and he was literally, I mean, there is footage of Dean Jones just walking
Stretcher.
to the side of the pitch, vomiting,
Yeah.
coming back to bat, and again hitting Maninder Singh and Ravi Shastri and Shivlal Yadav for 4s and 6s. So brilliant innings, great
Yes.
footwork, and
Yes.
an absolute. I mean, he really, in his own words, and it's a pity that we lost him very early last year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In his own words, he went through a wall,
Yeah.
in that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
then he was like, his career just took another turn. It was a great
Yeah.
innings. Absolutely.
I think Alan
Question-
Border also mentioned that's the best inning is seen by any batsman in India or something like that.
Mhm.
Yes, amazing
I mean,
footwork
that
and
says a lot.
absolute grit to battle the conditions. In fact, Steve Waugh, who had made his debut a year previously, he has gone on record to say that had that match been played today, they would have called it off because of the heat and humidity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
was
just
so hot.
gives you an idea of how oppressive
Exactly.
it must have been.
So
Yeah, September.
question then,
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Yogi.
question then, Devendra, would you say what Dean Jones was to that Australia team was like Kevin Peterson to the English cricket team?
Yes, you can say that because Kevin Peterson made an immediate impact at the start of his career. That match-saving innings in the last test of the 2005 Ashes. So it was Dean Jones's innings was pretty similar in terms of the impact. In fact, Alan Border was in two minds as to whom to nominate at number 3 because Boone and Marsh were the openers at the time, and Alan Border was a little confused between Mike Valletta and Dean Jones. So Dean Jones, in a way, was on trial, and he had been left out of the Australian team for a while, and this was his comeback series. So it was, I mean, his career was on the line, and Alan Border told him, you're going to bat at number 3, and Dean Jones, the way he responded was just phenomenal. Absolutely.
Correct.
I guess he was
Correct.
told the previous evening that he is going to bat at number 3, and he couldn't believe it because number 3 is a very critical position in a test in a team, and being given that kind of responsibility, I think you need to give a lot of credit to Alan Border also to actually have made that entire team. Look at Steve Waugh. Boone and Marsh were not original openers. They were from the middle up and made them as openers. And then he had this Dean Jones, Steve Waugh. I mean, he actually built that team. And that went on for about 20 years. They were almost unbeatable.
I mean, people talk about Steve Waugh. They talk about Mark Taylor initially, then Steve Waugh, then Ricky Ponting. And obviously those records are there, 16 wins in a row and all that. But who started it? I mean, if one of the most reliable parameters of determining the greatness of a cricketer is to see what state the team was in when that person either made his debut or became the captain, and then what state the team was in by the time he was done. And then Alan Border, I think he ticks all the boxes. Because when he took over as captain, Australian cricket was down and out. And then 93-94, when he finished, Australian cricket was just one step away from the summit. And they scaled the summit, beating the West Indies in the West Indies in 95. Ironically, 1 year after Alan Border retired. But those were all his boys who did that. So Alan Border is right up there in terms of the pantheon of cricketing greats.
Devendra, one question I'd ask, I was looking at the scorecards and I noticed Steve Waugh actually batted at number 11 in the first innings.
Wow.
So what was that about?
Actually, then I think there would be a mistake there because he may have come in late in the order. Because what I remember is that Dean Jones came in at 3. Ray Bright was sent in as night watchman. Then came Alan Border. Then he was followed by Greg Ritchie. And then probably Steve Waugh would have come in at 7. So maybe there's a mistake in that scorecard. But Steve Waugh did a lot of bowling in that match. He did a lot of bowling.
I mean, what I noticed is in the first innings, it's shown that Steve Waugh batted 11. But in the second innings, obviously, he came 7 or thereabouts.
Yeah, but they did not. Steve O wasn't. They declared at 574 for 7. So number 11 did not bat in any case in the first innings. They batted
Correct.
till the third morning. So basically,
Correct.
what Australia did is they ensured that they could not lose that match. Although it's another
Oh yeah.
matter altogether that they still came very
No,
close to losing it. But when you
Yeah.
declare on the third morning, when you have kept the opposition on the field for 2 days and a
Yeah.
bit of the third day in that heat and humidity, then you are
Yeah.
entitled to feel that okay, now I am in a comfortable position. So Steve
Has
Waugh,
there been any other instance when a team that has declared in both the innings almost lost the match?
I don't think so.
Good
I
one,
don't think
Mahesh.
that is again a tribute to tribute to Australia and Alan Border and Bob Simpson, the cricket. Those days, the
The
term coach
aggressiveness
wasn't
came
used. They
in.
used cricket manager. It was
Yeah,
cricket
cricket
manager.
manager.
I think it was only sometime in the mid 90s that we started using the term coach. So even I
Hmm.
think when Ajit Wadekar was he was our cricket manager from 92
Correct.
to
Correct.
96. He was
We used
never
to
a,
follow the football philosophy back then. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So
I think when Bob Woolmer was the coach of South Africa,
South
that's
South
when
Africa.
Africa. Yes.
the term
That could
coach
be.
came into being.
Could be.
Hmm.
Yes.
Because he
So
gave that
I think
earpiece to Crony and all that
Crowley
thing,
in
right?
the 99 World Cup, yeah. No, but
World
I
Cup.
think towards
Yeah.
the end of Bob Simpson's tenure, Bob Simpson had a 10-year tenure. Towards the end, he had his designation had changed to coach. So it happened during
Yeah.
Bob Simpson's time itself.
Yeah. And I think in the 90s or late 90s, probably ACB became Cricket Australia, right?
Cricket
Or
Australia.
early 2000s, maybe. Yeah. It
Yes,
was
yes.
Australian Cricket
So
Board
we are,
before. Yeah. I think what Yogesh's question was, Devendra, was also in relation to, the first ever show that we did, wherein we discussed one of the greatest innings played on Indian soil by a foreign batsman. And that's
yes.
when we all, universally voted, Kevin Peterson's 186 at
Hmm.
Wankhede as one
oh,
of
of
the
course.
best. And we
I was
actually voted
curious to
it
what was my.
because exactly, right? So we chose that because we had a specific time frame between the year 2000 to
Hmm.
2020. So, but then, this one was also discussed. Unfortunately, we could
Correct.
not watch it live back then. But then, of course, and the heat and humidity that you spoke about, you mentioned about the way he was walking in the hospital. He also mentioned about involuntary urination as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
he
Dean shows
basically lost
exactly
control
of the
on his
body.
body
Yeah,
function. Yeah,
yeah. He had a
Yep.
photograph as well of that, I think somewhere, and it was terrible to see, something like that happening to a person and then making a comeback once again and coming back on the field. That was like incredible, right? So you could not imagine that happening in today's day and age, wherein player
absolutely.
safety and there are so many norms around health and safety, right? So it becomes a human rights issue if you actually get the player
Yes,
back
yes,
on the field.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So it shows what those early days, yesteryear test cricketers were made of in terms of,
So
Correct.
their
I read the temperature on the day was 40 degrees. Now, this is
in
not 40
Chennai.
degrees exactly. So 40 degrees not in Pune wherein you'd get dry heat or something. This
Yes,
was
the
humid
humidity.
40.
Exactly. So
It
yeah,
is
you can
energy sapping.
literally, yeah. In Chennai, anything over 2025 itself is energy sapping. And imagine 40, right? Because of the humidity, it adds up to it. It might feel like 50-55. It might feel like you're playing in the
Hmm.
Middle East somewhere, right? So it's
No,
that
it's
bad. Yeah.
amazing. I mean, I remember in March 2001 when that
Yeah.
just before the third test of the greatest series of all time, India Australia,
Yes. Yes.
PMG where I was working, we had organized a rematch of that tight test, and
Before you go
at the
down,
Guru
yeah, I
Nanak.
just wanted to show this comment, exactly the same one which you're talking about, Devendra. Bhash has mentioned that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Australia
So
apparently won
I
that.
was there. I was one of the organizers of that match. It was a 40-over game because everyone was obviously in no physical shape, and it was one of those rare instances where you had the same set of players except for Steve Waugh, who was leading the Australian team in the 2001 series.
Yeah.
Um, Mohammad Azharuddin had not been invited,
Hmm.
and Kapil Dev had at that stage declared that he will never wear whites again. So,
Hmm.
apart from these three people, everybody else was there. The umpires were the same: Dara Dotiwala and Vikram Raju. Vikram Raju is the one who made that
Raise the
test
Yes.
record,
finger.
and even the official scorer was the same. I don't remember his name now. And Kishore Bhimani, the late Kishore Bhimani, who was
Yes.
Doordarshan's commentator, we invited him to do commentary for that game, and it
Yeah.
was a great occasion. I don't think anything like that has happened since. And
Yeah.
but the match itself was a no contest because India batted first, and India scored some 220 odd in 40 overs, and
Yeah.
Australia finished that match in about 20 overs. David Boone, who had, I think, been playing first class cricket till about 6 months previously, he just murdered whatever was there of the Indian bowlers. So we were all relieved that 3 3:30 match khatam hua, let's go to the hotel. Because I remember in the morning when we went to the ground, I was like, I was newer. It was I just completed a few months in PMG. So I was basically still living that childhood dream, being with all these cricketers. And
Yeah.
I thought, I'll just go to the pitch and take a look at it. So I went to the ground. And when I was on my way back, I could just feel the energy draining out of me. And
Yeah.
I remember running
Yeah.
to the commentary box area. There was a building there. And literally, I just gulped a bottle of water. So if that could happen to me, I was just walking. Imagine what the players would have gone through. I mean, that is where you realize you are a mortal, they are immortals, those
Exactly.
guys who are on the field of play. But yeah, it was
Exactly.
Dean Jones. I mean, what an innings.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
So
so
let's move
Devendra,
forward from Dean Jones. The next was
you know,
who played the best innings after that.
I would. It would be a tight one because as after Australia declared we were in trouble, many of our batsmen got starts, but then we stuttered a bit, and at the end of the third day, we were 270 for 7, so facing a follow-on threat. So the story goes that Kapil Dev was the captain and the overnight not out, and he was very upset with some of the shots that the batsman
yeah,
had played, and he, just fired the team left, right, and center. And then the following day, the same man goes out and hits 3 lofted boundaries, and
of
that's it.
Greg Matthews.
He refused to walk the talk. So he had criticized his batsman for lofting the ball and getting caught in the deep. And then the same man goes out, but that was Kapil. And Kapil, if you look at his career, you look at his best innings. His best innings invariably came in a crisis.
Correct. Correct.
There's a definite pattern to Kapil Dev's great innings. So
Yeah.
Kapil Dev's innings that enabled us to
Avoid the follow-on.
The follow-on target was
119.
huge, 375, and we were 105 short with just 3 wickets in hand. So Kapil got us past that mark. But
Yep.
then on the last day, the innings that Mr. Gavaskar played,
Yes.
Mr. Gavaskar was someone who
90.
I think was absolutely at home when it came to a 5th-day wicket, a target to be chased. A two-rating wicket. SMG was like in his
Yeah.
prime.
Yeah.
The worst conditions brought out the best in him. So
Yeah.
that
And
90 that he
remember,
scored,
he was not young at all. He was almost
absolutely.
just about a year away from retiring.
Retirement.
He was also,
Yeah.
I mean, age had already,
Yeah.
he was aging also. Yet he played a brilliant innings.
Yes.
Devendra, just talk about in terms of is the last day. You got 5.5 hours of play, right? Is 348. It's first test of a series, right? How unusual was it for a team to actually go about chasing it, and what would have made Indian team go for it?
Hmm.
To tell you very frankly, totally unusual. And even the Australians
Yeah.
did not expect India to go for the target. And they have
Yes.
said this on record. They
Yep.
thought that the Indians will go on the defensive and, we will lose. They'll take wickets.
Correct.
But I think that confidence, that victory in England just a couple
Yep.
of months previously, and the fact that we were the reigning world champions of one-day cricket, 83, 1985
And
World
the 85.
Championship of cricket. Yes,
85.
so
Yep.
that confidence was there. And what a team we had, Gavaskar, Shrikant, uh, Mohinder Amarnath, you had Mohammad Azharuddin. Dilip Vengsarkar was injured. The in-form player, he was injured. But, Mohammad Azharuddin, Ravi Shastri, Kapil Dev, Chandrakant Pandit actually played that game as Vengsarkar's replacement. But we batted right down to number 8, number 9. So,
Yep.
it was that confidence was there. And I think once Alan Border declared overnight, I think it was on the 5th morning that he
Correct.
declared. He went up to Kapil and said that, I'm done. So, you
Yep.
can go for it. So I think the Indians planned it very well. So the idea
Yep.
was that you go on bat normally till tea time and ensure that the
Yep.
score is around 180, 190, and then
Yep.
last session 140 to get somebody like Kapil Dev in the pavilion. Anything is possible, and we were on track. We were 193 for 2 at tea, and frankly, I think India should have won that game, but Again,
I think another underrated innings there as well, Devendra, is Ravi Shastri's knock, right? The
of
way
course, of
he
course. I mean,
played
he
that,
kept it going.
yeah, in the last hour, right? The way he kind of carried India into that last over, I think that's also
Yes,
something which is
of course, of course,
incredible.
of course. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a
and that.
great story that he
Mhm.
has narrated that when Kapil Dev got it, Kapil Dev scored just one, so his dismissal was a
Yeah,
big blow, and
yeah,
people felt that okay, now Kapil Dev has got out, so maybe the Indians will go for a draw now. So
correct.
apparently, when Kapil Dev was coming into bat, returning to the pavilion, Shastri was the next man in. So Shastri went to the other end of the side screen, so he did not want to cross Kapil because he did not want to hear the Kapil tell him that we have to now
Pull down the
put this
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
shutters.
pulled.
Shastri was like, we are going for it. And the very first or second ball that he faced, Alan Border had brought the field in, and Ravi Shastri came down the wicket and hit a boundary. So the field went right back. So yeah, it was a great
Yeah,
chase and
cat and mouse
a
kind of game
tremendous
in the end.
advertisement for Test cricket.
Absolutely,
Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely, yeah. So walk us through that last hour, Devendra. I mean, what happened there?
Yeah, so at one stage, Ravi Shastri and Chandrakant Pandit were doing very well, and I think as I said, we should have really won it, but the Australians were doing everything possible to sort of unsettle. So I think
Yeah,
some of the inexperienced guys, Chandrakant Pandit, later Chetan Sharma, they I think fell for that, succumbed to some over ambitious strokes. Then you had
Shivalal
Shivlal
Yadav.
Yadav, Shivlal Yadav coming in and hitting a six, and it was, I mean, it was. We just it was just great to see this happening in a test match, and
yeah,
then Shivlal Yadav got out and Maninder Singh had to come in and face the last two balls of
Yeah.
Ray Bright's penultimate over, and suddenly it seemed as if India would lose, but
yeah,
Maninder kept those last two balls out, and then it was 4 to win, 6 balls, Shastri on strike. The first ball Shastri negotiates, second ball they run two.
6 up 2.
yeah.
Steve Waugh misfielded, so they were able to complete a two. And the third ball, which some people still criticize Shastri for doing what he did, but I think he did
I
the
think he
right
did the
thing.
right thing.
So
Yeah,
he
at least
ensured
he
that
ensured
India
that you
did
don't
not lose
lose.
the game.
Exactly, exactly. Right.
So that is at Maninder on strike, 1 run to win, 3 balls to get, and
Hmm.
Maninder kept that fourth ball out. And fifth
Hmm.
ball, he was hit on the pad. The Australians appealed, and Vikram Raju decided that adjudged him out. And of course, Maninder, Ravi Shastri were both livid because they believed that it was an inside edge. And Alan Border himself, who was standing at silly point, also he was diplomatic, but he said that I think there was a hint of an inside edge. So, but in cricket, of course, the umpire is the boss, so he knows
And I think
best.
the umpire did not admit even after the game, right, that there was an inside edge. He still
Absolutely
stood by his
no,
decision, and yeah,
of course.
Obviously, he made a decision. He can't go back on his decision.
His
The
his
Australian had
fellow
already left the field, so it was too late. Even if he wanted to
exactly.
change it, he could not.
but his fellow umpire from square leg, he said, well, he did think that that could have been out. So
Yes, obviously that's solidarity. No, they will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, now
Umpires club.
the decision was made, so you've got to go by that. And yeah, of course,
Yeah.
it made that
Hmm.
match immortal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think another interesting comparison there when you mentioned about Shastri taking that single and ensuring that we don't lose is another similar instance is 2011 when we played West Indies when Ashwin scored that 100 and not the 100 but in the last day he was
Last
at
day,
the
yeah, yeah.
crease, right, and I think there were 2 balls to go, 2 runs needed, and he actually looked to defend the penultimate ball. So even we were livid as young fans, thinking that what is he doing? Why is he not scoring those runs? But
Yes,
then we
yes,
figured out that the sensible thing to do is that ensure that 2 of the last ball is still achievable, and we don't
yes,
lose the
yes,
game. So that's something
yes.
which is again tremendous application and clarity of thought under pressure, which is something sometimes you might the emotions might get the better of you. You might go for the
Absolutely.
victory, the winning stroke, and then you might end up losing the game as well.
But
So yeah.
interestingly, Alan Border always thought that Shastri is just waiting for the right ball and he's going to hit it in the stands.
correct.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
had Shastri got an inkling of how Border was thinking, he may have done something different.
Exactly.
But again, I think it doesn't it become more difficult to take a risk as you go closer to the result you want, because you're
Correct.
like, you put in so much work. Now if you try and go for that glory six as Border would have wanted, and if
Yep.
Shastri got out in that proceeding, right, then
Yeah.
it's almost like, well, people will come back and say you threw it away.
Correct.
Yes, correct,
Correct.
correct. And
You
Shastri was
know.
obviously, he had his head on his shoulders. So
I think he
of
was
course,
very sensible that day.
very sensible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think as a cricketer, definitely, his credentials and his performances were really up there, especially in these kind of crunch
In
moments
fact,
against top teams. Yeah.
it was in the same test in the second innings that he took his 100th test wicket as well. He had Jeff Marsh bowled. So he at that stage was only the third Indian to complete the double after Vinu Mankat and Kapil Dev. So
Yeah.
it was apart from being the not out batsman at the end of the game, he also took his 100th test
Yeah.
wicket in that game.
Yeah.
And that was his career. You can divide it into three phases. So he began as a bowler who could bat because I think he batted at number 10 on his debut.
Number 10 or
And then
11, yeah.
81 to 83, he was 81 to 82. He was a bowler who could bat. Then he was promoted to open the innings, and so 82 to 87 or so, he was an all-rounder, proper all-rounder. And then subsequently, he was an opening batsman, a middle order batsman who also bowled. So one of I think as a cricketer, he has not got his due. And then of course, he was champions also.
And then towards the end, he was a batsman who could also block.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially the 92 World Cup, I remember.
92 World Cup, of course, that he faced a lot of backlash. But if you remember our subsequent tour of South Africa, we won
26 of 14 balls
of him because he went for the big shots at the end. So he was capable of adjusting to different situations.
Multifaceted cricketer, yeah, for sure.
And very gritty, I thought. He was very gritty.
Yes.
He wouldn't throw in the towel very quickly. And that is the reason why I think he actually utilized his limited talent to the fullest.
Yeah, and how many batsmen can boast about having scored 2 test centuries on West Indian soil in the 80s against the pace battery? Shastri has that distinction. Both in 83 as well as 89. He scored, and 83 there was Roberts, Garner, Marshall, Holding. And in 88 you had Marshall, Ambrose, Walsh, and I think probably Bishop. So imagine, against bowling of that quality to score centuries.
Agreed. And the double 100 in 91, 92, right? Shane Warne talks a lot about it, for sure. And I think even Sachin, for that matter. Debut test match, exactly, right? Even Sachin, for that matter, spoke a lot about, how Shastri was decimating the Australian attack in that innings, and especially Shane Warne, the way he could hit him over extra cover and the same ball over long on and stuff, right? So I think it was incredible.
The Australian commentators even spoke a lot about his footwork. They said his footwork was just brilliant.
Correct.
I think it was quite unfortunate that he had that knee problem and he was forced to retire. He was only, I think, 31 or 32 when he retired. He could have gone on, probably even led India. It's...
I think he only retired in one test.
Just one test match. No other cricketer had been groomed for the job like him, because 1981, India under 19 went to England, he was captain. Then whenever there was some under 25, under 22 match or tour, whether it was to Zimbabwe or Sri Lanka, he was appointed captain. Then in 85, they made him vice captain to Kapil Dev. So the board had done a little bit of, long-term planning. But then I think he probably suffered from a loss of form shortly after this tight test, in fact, ironically. And after the 87 World Cup, Vengsarkar was made captain ahead of him.
Correct.
And then Azhar became the captain.
So one incident I want to kind of ask you about is Kiran More was the chosen wicketkeeper in this match.
Yes.
But then there was somebody else who had to don the gloves.
Yes. I think we were very lucky that you had a specialist wicketkeeper in the 11, because I think Kiran More, after a few overs on the very first day, I think he suffered from dehydration. So luckily Pandit was there. So you can just imagine the very first day, the problems had started, and if it could happen to an Indian,
exactly,
then the Australians were like sitting ducks. But full credit to them for batting for 2 days and a bit. Absolutely. Correct. Amazing performance.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So I hope, Anurag, you got your dose on Ravi Shastri. He mentioned in a comment that obviously he was born in 98 and he could not see much of Ravi Shastri. But then, of course, from what I have seen a little of Ravi Shastri, I think my first memory was like that double 100. back in 91, 92. And that time I was like 7, 8 years old. But then, that's when I started watching cricket. That's
No,
probably the
Shastri
time
was
that,
responsible
all of
for a
us.
lot. He scored 62 in the first innings.
Yeah.
So I think he was the second highest scorer after Kapil Dev in the first innings. And then second day, of course, 48, not out, couple of big sixes. And there was one, tempers were flaring. It was the heat and humidity.
Yes.
On the fifth day, it just got to everybody. So there
Correct.
was one instance where Dara Dotiwala, the umpire, he went up to Alan Border and he said, you need to speed up. You're taking a lot of time because Alan Border, imagine you've declared twice and you're coming close to losing. He must have just lost his head. So Dotiwala went to him and told him that, you need to speed up. And I think Alan Border reacted angrily. No referees those days, so players could take some liberties. And then I think Dotiwala threatened to send him off.
Yes.
Yes. I will report you and I'll send. So Ravi Shastri actually stepped in and acted as the referee and, please continue the match because he wanted to win the game. He said that please don't carry on. Let's continue with the game. So Shastri had a big role to play that evening.
Yeah. I think
best time would have been around the 1985 to 87. I think maybe that was his best period. I thought because he was
as an all-rounder, but as a batsman it was later. 84, 85 obviously was his peak because he scored centuries, he took wickets, 6 sixes in an over in a Ranji game, champion of champions in Australia, 8 wickets in the Ranji final.
Series, that World Championship series, almost, he was whatever he did was turning to gold kind of a thing.
Yes,
he got wickets
absolutely.
whenever he bowled, he scored runs. Even in the final he scored runs. He was one of the reasons why we won that World Championship of Cricket.
Correct.
Of course,
it was similar to what Yuvraj did similar to what
and
Yuvraj
in fact,
did in
what people don't remember is a few days after that World Championship of Cricket, of course, we won the Rothmans Cup in Sharjah as well. And after that, we had the Ranji Trophy final between Mumbai and Delhi. And he took 8 wickets in the second innings and Mumbai defeated Delhi. So it was a golden season. Like it was
that was his best period.
Yeah. But Shastri was also the reason why Indians knew there was a car named Audi.
Yeah. Because for my generation, I grew up in the era of the Fiat and Ambassador. Oh, acha, Audi jaisa kuch hota hai kya? It was
correct.
It was. I had never heard the term Audi.
Yeah.
Because
I think he got a tax exemption as well, right, for bringing it.
Yes, Rajiv Gandhi, the Prime Minister.
But then I think it was a good gesture by the Prime Minister because he won something, because he represented India. He won India the title, and so he was gifted for being the best player of the tournament. I think that was okay. Yeah. It's only when you get gifts and you are supposed to get it for your personal thing. I think I'm not a big fan of that. You need to pay tax for it.
You're not talking about Ferrari, are you?
Not only Ferrari, anybody else, whatever it is.
So that tells you a story as well, right, guys? In those days, the money that the cricketers used to get versus now, right? Imagine the tax exemption mattered so much to them at that point in time. But now they could literally go to another country and buy a car and come back, right? The way they are played these days, right? So that's a huge difference in the way cricket was played back then versus now in terms of.
And that tight test, incidentally, it was also significant for Mr. Gavaskar because it was his 100th consecutive test for India.
Correct. First cricketer to do it.
Yeah, he was the first cricketer to play 100 tests in a row. He made it one to remember with that 90 on the last day. So one of the many great fourth innings knocks of his, so you go all the way back to his debut at Port of Spain, 67 not out. Then obviously the double century at the Oval, chasing 438. Then Brisbane 77, 113, chasing 341. Then Trinidad, Port of Spain 76, 102, chasing 402, which the only time we really scaled the summit. And then this one. And then, of course,
the last test
was
match.
The first test of the Indian season. And the last test of the same 86-87 season against Chase, 220 an absolute minefield. He scored 96.
So, I'm just amazed at these scores which you mentioned, Devendra. Like, India is probably one of those teams which has always, looked to chase down these kind of humongous totals in the fourth innings, right? And it's incredible the way we have kind of chased down those scores, And I think probably when you mentioned that 100 consecutive tests, was Sir Alistair Cook the second one to do it? Or if I'm not wrong? I don't know. I
think
mean, I probably read something similar.
I don't think he may have missed the odd game in between. Alan Border certainly
Okay.
missed.
Okay.
Obviously, Sachin, Rahul, they all also
They
missed games.
missed. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
they all.
Yeah. Because I read
Kapil
something
Dev would
about
have
Alistair Cook.
Kapil
Yeah.
Dev would have played his
Kapil
entire
Dev
career
would
in
have done
that
it
one
if
game
it was not.
disciplinary reasons.
Yeah.
He was dropped.
Yeah.
That was it was
So,
one of those
you know,
things that
um,
Kapil
it's
Dev
because
getting
of this.
dropped is equal to Rahul Dravid declaring the innings Tendulkar was at 194. There are certain things that the captains do.
Let's not get
but
there,
there are stories I have actually referred written about them in my biography of Mr. Gavaskar as well. I think Mr. Gavaskar unfairly got the blame for Kapil's dropping because there were other people present, and as we all know, the captain of India does not have a say. He's just informed. So there were some selectors who had rather strong views on Kapil Dev, but
I
obviously
think
the
Kapil
captain.
Dev and Sandeep Patil both were dropped, I think.
That was a smoke screen. Basically, अभी इसको निकाला है तो इसको भी निकालना चाहिए. That was all that is there.
Now, Devendra, we were talking about this tie test, right? Now, imagine if India had actually got that last run, right? There was one name which nobody would have remembered, right? But now we all remember V. Vikramaraju because he was the one who raised that finger. Now the irony of this situation is Vikramaraju never actually officiated another test match.
Yes.
It's not irony, Yogesh.
It should not have happened that way. It's unfortunate.
Because I think he had an opportunity to officiate quite a few significant games for India before that decision. And sometimes do you wonder that, in the moment, he probably thought he'd made the right decision under such a testing situation, because as an umpire, right, he was basically the one judging the outcome, such a significant one.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
And I think even umpires are humans, right? If you see, if the conditions can get the worst out of the players, why do we forget the umpires? They are the ones
there from the first ball.
Exactly, right? So players get an opportunity to go back into the dressing room, take a rest and come back. But these guys are there 5 days, literally 6 hours a day, right? So, I mean, I think there's something that there should be a consideration for them as well, So I think sometimes we are a bit too hard on the umpires as well. And we're talking about those days where there was no technology to assist us, right? So you have to use your naked eye to make
and no referees also. So like the opposition players, the visiting team players would put them under a lot of pressure as well.
Exactly. And, as they say in our, Yogesh must be knowing, in our club cricket matches, right? Sometimes the decision is based on the appeal than the actual event happening.
How loud and convincing.
Tempers flaring up, and on the last day, I definitely saw that happening in that limited footage which was available.
The Australian Broadcasting Corporation did a wonderful documentary in 2006 called Madras Magic. It is available on YouTube.
Yes, exactly.
Please watch it, all the listeners, all the viewers also. I recommend watch it. And Mike Coward, the senior journalist from Australia, he was the brain behind it. And if you watch the entire documentary and you see the closing credits, you will see a familiar name in the closing credits. I did a little bit of coordination work for him. So there's Clayton Murzillo, and there's me. So we have both he's been very clear. Mr. Mike Coward was very kind to mention both of us. And I remember, sending a mail to Alan Border after watching that documentary. And I asked him that, why didn't you bring yourself onto bowl? Because he was, after all, a very capable left-arm spinner.
Correct.
And his reply was that, thank God I did not do that, because the match would have ended long back and India would have won easily. But talking of Alan Border, I think if, exactly 10 years after that game, the Border Gavaskar Trophy came into being. And there is reason to believe that this particular tight test had a big role to play in that, that decision to come up with a trophy. Of course, two giants, both the first two cricketers to score over 10,000 runs in Test cricket. And both of them starred in this tight test. Gavaskar scored 90 on the last day. Alan Border scored a century in the first innings. And of course, he was captain of Australia. So I think that when people talk today about the India-Australia rivalry being the greatest rivalry, bigger than the Ashes, I think it all began in the heat and humidity of Chennai 35 years ago.
Yes, and Chennai
Nice
has
one.
this reputation of producing some real
Oh my
thrillers,
God!
right?
Because very next year, I mean, there couldn't have been a more extraordinary coincidence. First World Cup match in India, India
Yeah.
versus Australia at Chennai, and guess what?
2 runs.
Who gets out in the last over? Maninder Singh. India lose by 1 run. This time, of course, it was not Greg Matthews, but Steve Waugh bowling the last over. That was the only difference.
Hmm.
But and
Yeah.
another match that India should have won easily, but again,
Yeah.
some over ambitious batting towards
Deja
the
vu
end.
moment.
And then, of
Yeah.
course,
Right.
2001, that hard, that the deciding game of that series, where Harbhajan finally won it for us. Oh God!
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And who can forget, yeah, the game versus Pakistan. Oh my God,
Yeah,
1999. Oh
of
my
course.
God,
But
that
India
was
Australia at Chennai is
yeah,
something
yeah.
something
Yeah,
special.
I was talking about just Chennai in particular in terms
Uh-huh.
of producing these thrillers. In
Thrillers,
terms
yeah.
of yeah. Oh my God.
And you
Oh,
never know, 2004, if you remember the 2004 Test match, it was
Yeah, which got
tantalizingly
rained
poised.
out.
We had a target. We were, no loss. I think we had the
Mm,
whole of the last day, and then it
yeah,
rained. That entire day
yeah,
was watched. You never know what would have happened had
correct.
that the last day been played.
Exactly,
So
because that was one champion Australian team. They could have
oh, of
maybe
course.
brought the game really close on that day as well. Yeah.
mm. This
Okay.
reminds me of that Bollywood line, ना? इंडिया ऑस्ट्रेलिया इन चेन्नई अपने को ना जरा कुछ धक धक जैसा हो रहा है.
Absolutely, yeah. My God, it was.
Yes.
Another thing
All
I remember is, I remember I was in my school bus, and we were somebody had a radio or something, so we were listening. I
Mm,
don't know how they managed to get a radio to school, but we were listening, and something was like, okay, many of us had not heard the term tie before. So it
correct.
was like India won, Australia won. What is this? It's a draw, no. And then finally, okay, it's a tie. And I think I was the one who told the others that there is something called the tie when the scores are level and
Yeah,
all the wickets are lost. That's a tie. So there
yeah.
were many people who did not even know. Okay, ऐसे कुछ होता है. There's a fourth result possible in cricket. So
I
that
think
is what I remember.
that's where Mr. Shastri got the famous commentary term that he always uses. Fascinating day of cricket, all four results possible. So,
Yes,
so that's how it came into existence.
yes.
All right, guys. Thanks, Devendra. Lovely stories, and I mean,
My pleasure.
we kind of feel so it's I don't know how to express this. It's such a pleasure to have you and have access to somebody like you in our shows, and the way you narrate these stories, it's such a privilege for all of us to kind of hear these
Thank
stories
you
and
very much.
go back down memory lane. And it's important for this generation, and especially for even for us as well, right, to kind of understand how test cricket used to be played back then. Because at Cherry and Timber Talk, our
Correct.
entire focus is predominantly around contest between bat and ball, good old test cricket days and stuff. Of course, we also talk about ODIs and T20s, but down somewhere in our mind, in our heart, we are all hardcore test cricket lovers. And
Of course.
having guests like you and discussing these things obviously enlightens us, and really love we love having that, love doing that on
Thank
our
you.
shows
Thank
as
you
well.
very much.
All right, guys. So yeah, look forward to catching up again next week, and hopefully with some action around the upcoming T20 World Cup and the series which we're going to play after those as well. So yeah,
And small
we'll
matter
catch
of
up soon.
IPL maybe.
Yeah, and IPL as well. Yeah, a bit of IPL as well.
A
Yeah,
bit
in
of
between.
idea.
All right,
No.
guys. See you
No.
soon. Take care. Cheers. Bye
Okay,
bye.
thank you. See
Yes,
you.
okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.